What if I told you that making a man happy doesn't require perfection, sacrifice, or exhaustion? But most wives never discover this because they're trying to fix the wrong problem. Today we're solving the silent disconnect that slowly drains love, intimacy, and peace from modern relationships. Let's start with a truth that makes people uncomfortable. Men are not emotionally complex in the way society portrays them. They don't hide secret emotional mazes. They are not riddles waiting to be solved. They are simple, but they are also deeply neglected at the psychological level. Now pause for a second, because this is where most people misunderstand men. When we say simple, people hear shallow. That's not what this means. A man's emotional system operates on a small number of core signals: respect, acceptance, peace. When these signals are present, he thrives. When they're missing, his entire inner world begins to shut down. And here's the problem: most wives never notice when this shutdown begins. Why? Because men are trained from an early age to internalize emotional discomfort. They don't express pain the way women do. They don't verbalize emotional confusion. They retreat inward, believing silence is safer than explanation. So what happens in relationships? A wife assumes if he's quiet, he's fine. But psychologically, quiet doesn't mean calm. It often means overloaded. Men are rarely asked how they feel in a way that feels safe. When they are asked, it often comes with judgment, correction, or emotional consequences. So they learn quickly openness equals conflict. And once a man learns that lesson, he adapts. He stops sharing thoughts that feel unfinished, stops expressing doubts, stops revealing vulnerabilities. Not because he doesn't have them, but because the cost feels too high. This is what psychological neglect looks like. It's not cruelty. It's not intentional harm. It's misunderstanding layered over years of habit. Many wives focus on emotional connection through communication, discussion, and problem solving. Men experience emotional connection through emotional safety. Those are not the same thing. A man doesn't feel closer because you ask 10 questions. He feels closer when he knows his answer won't be used against him later. He doesn't open up because he lacks emotions. He stays closed because previous openness created tension, disappointment, or control. Over time, this creates a dangerous illusion. The wife believes she's emotionally available. The man feels emotionally invisible. And because men don't articulate emotional neglect, it goes unnoticed for years. Men don't ask for emotional care the way women do. They don't demand reassurance. They don't chase validation. They wait. They wait to see if their presence is valued without performance. They wait to see if their efforts are recognized without comparison. They wait to see if silence can exist without accusation. And when those things never arrive, something subtle happens. The man doesn't become angry, he becomes distant. Not dramatic distance, quiet distance. He still shows up, still provides, still participates. But emotionally, he begins to live in a smaller internal world. This is why men often say they feel fine, even when they are not. Because fine means manageable, it doesn't mean fulfilled. Psychological neglect doesn't explode relationships. It erodes them slowly. And because men endure rather than express, the erosion often goes unnoticed until the connection feels cold, transactional, or empty. The tragedy is that most wives are not unwilling to care. They simply don't realize that men need more emotional intensity. They need emotional permission. There is a quiet misunderstanding that ruins more relationships than betrayal, distance, or even conflict. The belief that happiness for a man comes from comfort, pleasure, or reward. It doesn't. A man does not measure his happiness by what he receives. He measures it by what he is seen for. Recognition is the emotional currency of the male psyche. Not flattery, not constant praise, recognition. When a man feels recognized, his nervous system relaxes, his sense of identity stabilizes, his motivation deepens. But when recognition is missing, nothing else compensates for it. You can give him comfort, intimacy, security, even loyalty, and he will still feel empty if his efforts are invisible. Most wives believe love is expressed through emotional availability, nurturing, and communication. Men experience love through acknowledgement of contribution. Not contribution in a grand sense, but in the daily, often unnoticed acts that define his role in the relationship. A man wants to know that what he does matters, that his presence is not replaceable, that his efforts are not expected by default. When recognition disappears, a man begins to feel like a function instead of a person. He becomes the provider, the fixer, the stable one. And over time, he internalizes the message that his value lies in output, not existence. This is where resentment quietly begins, not loud resentment, but emotional fatigue. A man who feels unrecognized doesn't argue about it. He doesn't demand appreciation. He simply reduces effort. Not out of punishment, but self-protection. Because investing energy where it goes unseen feels psychologically unsafe. Recognition isn't saying thank you for everything. It's acknowledging intent. It's noticing the thought behind the action, not just the result. It's understanding that a man's way of expressing care often looks practical, not poetic. Many men love through responsibility, through consistency, through reliability. But when these expressions are treated as obligations rather than choices, the emotional reward disappears. And this is where many wives unknowingly shut down a man's happiness. They assume reliability means he doesn't need reassurance. They assume strength means he doesn't need validation. They assume silence means contentment. But psychologically, men crave recognition just as deeply as women crave emotional closeness. The difference is men rarely ask for it, because asking feels like weakness, and weakness feels dangerous. So instead, men hope. They hope their effort will be noticed without being announced. They hope their sacrifices will be felt without explanation. They hope their presence will be valued without comparison. When that hope fades, the man doesn't complain. He adapts. He becomes efficient, not passionate, present but not emotionally invested, reliable but disconnected. Recognition keeps a man emotionally alive in a relationship. It tells him he is not just useful but wanted. Not just responsible, but appreciated. Not just there, but chosen. A man who feels recognized will give more than is asked. He will protect peace instead of defending ego. He will open emotionally because he feels secure in his value. But when recognition is absent, happiness becomes unreachable no matter how much comfort surrounds him. And this is why happiness for a man has never been about luxury. It has always been about being seen. Most relationships don't collapse because of major mistakes. They fracture because of unspoken rules. Rules that were never agreed upon, expectations that were never communicated, standards that were silently enforced. This is where tension is born. Silent expectations are dangerous because they feel justified to the person holding them. If something feels obvious to you, you assume it should be obvious to your partner. And when it isn't met, disappointment turns into frustration. Men and women often operate with very different expectation systems. Many wives expect emotional intuition. They expect awareness. They expect their partner to sense emotional shifts without being told. Men expect clarity. Not because they lack care, but because they process relationships through logic and structure. They don't scan emotional environments the way women do. They respond to what is expressed, not what is implied. So when expectations remain silent, a psychological gap forms. The man feels blindsided. A wife may think, if he loved me, he would know. The man thinks, if it mattered, she would say it. Neither is wrong, but neither is aligned. Silent expectations create a lose-lose dynamic. When a man fails to meet an expectation he didn't know existed, he's often met with disappointment rather than explanation. Tone shifts, distance grows, affection cools. From the man's perspective, punishment arrives without a crime. Psychologically, this triggers confusion first, then withdrawal. Men don't fight silent expectations. They disengage from them. They stop trying to guess, stop initiating, stop risking emotional missteps, because guessing wrong feels worse than doing nothing at all. This is why many men appear emotionally passive over time, not because they don't care, but because the emotional cost of being wrong has become too high. And the more expectations remain unspoken, the more the wife feels emotionally alone. She feels like she's carrying the emotional load by herself. She feels unseen. She feels like she's asking for too much when she isn't asking at all. That contradiction creates resentment. Resentment then disguises itself as criticism. Criticism feels corrective to the wife, but to the man it feels like proof that his efforts are never enough. So he shuts down further. This cycle repeats quietly. Silent expectations are especially damaging because they transform love into a test the man doesn't know he's taking, a test he can never pass. Over time, the relationship becomes emotionally exhausting for both sides. The wife feels emotionally starved. The man feels emotionally unsafe. Neither feels understood. What makes this even more complicated is that silent expectations often come from unmet needs. The wife may not even realize what she expects. She just knows she feels disappointed. The man senses the disappointment but has no roadmap to correct it. So instead of solving the problem, both retreat into assumptions. Assumptions replace conversations, interpretations replace clarity, and every misunderstanding compounds the next. Men are not resistant to meeting expectations. They are resistant to being judged for expectations they were never informed about. When expectations are spoken, men respond. When expectations are implied, men retreat. Clarity gives men confidence. Ambiguity creates anxiety. A man who understands what is needed can show up fully. A man who is guessing will always hold back. And this is why so many conflicts feel repetitive. The issue isn't effort, it's alignment. The tragedy of silent expectations is that they are meant to protect emotional vulnerability, but they end up destroying emotional connection. Because love cannot thrive where understanding is assumed instead of built. Most people believe trying in a relationship means doing more. More communication, more effort, more emotional labor. But trying has very little to do with intensity. It has everything to do with awareness. Awareness of how your partner experiences the relationship internally. For men, emotional fulfillment does not come from grand gestures or constant engagement. It comes from feeling understood in the way their mind actually works. Many wives are genuinely trying. They invest energy, emotion, time, and care. Yet the man still feels disconnected. Not because the effort is lacking, but because the effort is misdirected. Trying without awareness often becomes pressure. Pressure to respond a certain way. Pressure to communicate on demand. Pressure to meet emotional expectations that don't align with his nature. Men don't experience emotional closeness through intensity. They experience it through emotional safety. Awareness means recognizing that a man's silence is not always avoidance. Sometimes it's regulation. Sometimes it's processing. Sometimes it's his way of staying balanced. When silence is constantly challenged, corrected, or interpreted as a problem, a man learns that being himself creates tension. So he adapts. He speaks less. He shares selectively. He keeps his inner world guarded. Not because he wants distance, but because peace matters more than expression. Trying with awareness means understanding that men don't open up when pushed. They open up when they feel safe enough to do so. And safety is created through consistency, not confrontation. Awareness also means recognizing how men interpret emotional feedback. A comment meant as guidance may feel like criticism. A suggestion meant as care may feel like control. A question meant as curiosity may feel like interrogation. Men are highly sensitive to perceived disapproval, even if they don't show it. When a man feels constantly evaluated, he becomes performance-oriented. He focuses on avoiding mistakes rather than building connection. Trying harder in that environment only deepens the divide. Awareness shifts the dynamic. It moves the focus from changing behavior to understanding impact. It means asking not, why isn't he trying? But, how does he experience my trying? Many wives unintentionally communicate dissatisfaction as motivation. They believe pointing out what's missing will inspire improvement. For men, constant focus on what's wrong erodes confidence. Men grow through encouragement, not correction. Awareness recognizes that a man's sense of self-worth is closely tied to competence. When that competence is questioned even subtly, emotional withdrawal follows. Trying with awareness means offering trust before demanding proof. It means allowing space without assuming abandonment. It means appreciating effort even when it doesn't look perfect. Men don't need to be managed to show up. They need to be trusted. When a man feels trusted, he naturally leans in. When he feels monitored, he pulls back. Awareness also means recognizing that emotional connection for men is often indirect. Shared silence, shared routine, shared stability. These moments may not look emotional, but they are deeply bonding for men. Trying doesn't mean forcing emotional depth. It means respecting emotional rhythm. When awareness replaces intensity, trying stops feeling exhausting. It becomes intuitive. It becomes calm. It becomes effective. A man who feels understood doesn't need to be pushed. He moves willingly. And this is the difference between effort that drains a relationship and awareness that transforms it. Because real trying doesn't demand change. It creates space for connection. So here is the truth, stripped of emotion, blame, and noise. Making a man happy was never about doing more. It was never about perfection, sacrifice, or losing yourself in the process. It was always about understanding how his inner world actually works. Men are emotionally simple but psychologically overlooked. They don't ask loudly for what they need. They endure, adapt, and withdraw quietly. A man doesn't fall apart when love disappears. He fades when recognition disappears, when effort goes unseen, when presence becomes expected instead of appreciated. Conflict doesn't grow from lack of love. It grows from unspoken expectations that slowly turn connection into pressure, from assumptions that replace clarity, from disappointment that is felt but never explained. And trying was never the problem. Trying without awareness creates exhaustion. Trying with awareness creates safety. When a man feels safe, he opens. When he feels respected, he gives. When he feels recognized, he stays emotionally present. This isn't about changing women, and it's not about excusing men. It's about alignment. Understanding that love is not experienced the same way by everyone, that intention doesn't equal impact, and that small psychological shifts can repair what effort alone never could. The truth is simple. When a man feels seen, trusted, and respected, happiness follows naturally. And when that understanding enters a relationship, love stops feeling like work and starts feeling like home.